And a very good morning to Harry Atherton, in
Good, good
Castle
morning, Steve.
Normandy. How are you, Harry?
I'm fine, just fine. Bright sunshine in Normandy,
Oh,
and
yes.
night of the heat wave is gone. It's not terribly warm, um, but it's very pleasant.
Yeah, it looks like a sort of what we would call in England a pleasant day outside.
Indeed, it is. Yeah.
Now, how are things in your neck of the woods, Harry? Let's start off with France this morning, shall we? Because it's where you live and you see and feel it every day. And I'm secretly in love with Marina Le Pen. Uh,
Yeah.
so, how are things in France?
Well, on a daily basis, I think they're finally getting on top of the fires, the wildfire problem in the southwest of France, which was threatening quite a lot of, I mean, there'd been terrible loss of life and homes and a very serious affair. But they, with the help of the farming community, who have a lot of helping the firemen, and then firemen coming in from countries round about, in fact, as I say, they seem to have won the battle finally. It's not out. It's not. There's still problems in certain areas, but they're pretty much on top of things now. And anyway, talking about politics, Marine Le Pen, she seems to be pretty much on the inside track now to win. All of the polling figures indicate that she will be way ahead in the first round. It's a two-round election for a presidential election in France, and she'll be way ahead in the first round. And then in the second round, there's no challenger that looks like they'll come even close. So these are the polls. I mean,
Where is the election?
polls are notoriously unreliable, but nonetheless, the percentage error in polling is such that even with that absorbed, it looks like she will become the next president, or her deputy, Jordan Bardella, will become the next president of France.
And when is the election?
Next in 27.
And which month?
Oh gosh, good question. When is it? I'm not sure, so I'd better not throw out a figure. It's fairly early on in the year, as I recall, May, June, or something like that.
Yes. So if the polls are in her favour now,
Yeah.
the polls are good, aren't they? Because as they say, a week is a long time in politics.
Oh, indeed it is. But I don't think that the general drift will change between now and then. It's the twilight years for Macron, and I don't see him pulling a rabbit out of the hat. Is pretty much lame duck at the moment, and the general political philosophy of France is not going to change in that time, and all the major questions that governments have to address, such as economic problems and social problems. I don't think you're going to see any major change between now and the election.
All right.
Hmm.
Well, is what is your forecast if she becomes president? What dramatic changes can you expect, or will it be much of the same and gently move towards centre right?
Well, I don't think there'll be any particular move to the right. Father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, of course, was pretty right wing, but she's distanced herself from his philosophies, and I think she's become very much more of a workers' party. And so I think you'll get a burst of populism, but you'll also get a burst of reality, because anybody aspiring to take on the top job, whether it's Burnham in England or Marine Le Pen in France, when they get into the seat of power, they suddenly realize that their margin for maneuver is very limited, and not largely for financial reasons. And what the people will accept as major change, what I think is known as the Overton window, what will be acceptable to the public, and will not impact too negatively on their lives. So I think you probably, yes, get. She won't make any dramatic changes. You'll get life continuing as it is, but maybe some of the rather silly extremes, the woke extremes, the ecological extremes, the academic extremes. I don't think you'll. I think you'll see major changes there, but the actual daily life of the French would change dramatically.
Right. So more of the same, but under a different administration.
Sure, and it'll pull it slightly more to the right, but then of course the right is still pretty left wing in France. This the center of French politics is well to the left, and so if in Britain it's somewhere in the middle, in the United States it's somewhere to the right, the center of politics. In France, ever since the revolution, it's been literally a left wing country by nature, and anybody who is right of center is considered to be extreme, which of course is unfortunate because they're not. And she is, I would say that if anything, she's in the center or slightly to the left of center.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You mentioned the revolution,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sorry, I'm trying to get rid of our competitor, the BBC. Oh, there we go. Managed it at last. I was reading the other day about Tom Paine, who, of course, was incarcerated in France after being part of Robespierre's group. But his vision of reform, as opposed to Edmund Burke's.
Yes.
Edmund Burke, of course, for our viewers, being one of his famous quotes was, there are three estates of Parliament, and there sits the fourth, pointing to the press gallery, perhaps more powerful than them all.
Yes, yes.
But it was interesting that they both aspired to the same thing, but wanted to take totally different routes, totally different. And of course, that opened my eyes a little bit to politics. Is quite often people want the same thing, but can't possibly do it the same way. So that makes it all the more interesting. Anyway, Harry, is somebody this morning mentioned Trump? His power and influence seems to be receding to me, looking at it from a distance. What's your view?
Oh, well, I think Trump has blown it. There's no question. I mean, he's made an appalling mess of things, and when in international relations generally, he's no longer allied himself with Europe. In fact, whoever would want to be ally themselves with the United States of Donald Trump, I don't know at the moment because he's just not to be trusted, and he's made a mess of, as I say, the Middle East. So I think his days are numbered, and then with the midterm elections coming up, I think he'll lose a lot of his power.
All right. So now, where does America go from here? Because the midterms are quite indicative. What do you think is going to happen in the midterms?
Well, there's no evident successor to him on the right, unless you've got J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio as the major contenders. But there's even a greater dearth of representation on the left in the Democratic Party. There's nobody that is Gavin Newsom in California seems to be the front runner, but I think he's pretty much of a spent force. He's not a heavyweight in politics, not national politics. He was in California. So no, I think the states will continue to have a Republican government next time around. As I say, whether it's Vance or Rubio or somebody of that ilk, as long as Trump doesn't mess things up completely before he leaves.
Do you think, Harry, that if the states don't find a charismatic leader, a Kennedy, or even the film star, that they actually will start to slide back, or is there infrastructure, the ability to create huge amounts of money, likely to keep them hurtling forward?
Well, it's a question of very often you look at the States and you think of all of the brilliant and clever people. I mean, we mustn't certainly, just because Trump has proved to be an idiot, we mustn't write off the American people. It's a dynamic society and it produces many great leaders. But whether in the modern era and today people want to put themselves forward into politics when the business opportunities and other ways to shine. It's amazing in a country with that human and intellectual wealth that there aren't better people that are brought to the fore and to run the country. They're not a very impressive group, and of course, it's a top-down system. It's a democratic dictatorship. The president has a tremendous amount of power, as in fact the president in France does under the French Constitution that was rewritten by de Gaulle. So it does exclude certain classes of people who don't want to be subordinate, who want to express themselves fully and do so in other spheres of activity rather than politics. They choose other careers.
Well, I mean, why aren't we seeing, as you say, a very talented country, or all sorts of people in politics? Why aren't we seeing any evident successor either? Rising up the ranks of the Democratic Party to take on a weakened Republican Party, or for that matter, charismatic people to take over from Trump?
Well, there are people who aspire to rising to the top of the political pile, but none of them stand out. They're not people that are inspirational, that you would think of as born leaders that suddenly will produce an enthusiastic following. And going into politics, people can make a lot of money in politics depending on how they exploit their position. I'm not talking about corruption there, but once they get onto the speaking circuit and that sort of stuff, they can. People like Tony Blair have done very well after politics financially. But if you're a young person in the States and you want to get ahead, you go into business. The business of the United States is business. It's not politics.
Yes. I always remember a movie called The Candidate with the Butch Cassidy. What was his name? The politician who played Butch, or the actor that played Butch Cassidy, was playing the part of the candidate. Robert Redford.
Robert Redford, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the last scene in the movie is that he dives into a hotel room with his political advisor just after they've won, and he says, something like, "Bloody hell, Harry, we've won. But what do we do now?"
Right. Yeah.
Right. So what do we do, Harry, when it comes to the Far East? China, India, but also, what we think of as the Far East, Singapore. What's happening there?
Well, the rising power in Asia is essentially India. China has a demographic problem. It also has a debt problem. It's also got a very high unemployment problem at the moment. I think 15% of young people in China are without a job. And that's pretty heavy duty, even for a totalitarian economy like they have. Whereas India is cooking with gas. It's moving ahead at an amazing rate. So I think if you're looking ahead, a century, let's say 100 years, and I think India will end up demographically dominating China. China's population will peak if it hasn't already, and then will start shrinking. typically like Japan. I mean, the shrinkage of the population of Japan over the next 100 years will be quite dramatic. It even could be halved. So the rising star is India, and now in the meantime, China will start pushing and shoving, elbowing its way around the South China Sea and beyond, and trying to influence evolution in Africa or other places. But and depending on how America acts to contain it, America is still the big boy on the block. Its economy, as China's economy, is only 2/3 that of the United States. The United States is still extremely powerful in economic terms, and depending on how it's managed, and if it wants to extend its sphere of influence to Asia, which it may well do, it seems to be giving up on Europe, which is amazing, getting itself into the glue in the Middle East, and so it still could be showing a strong interest in Asia, and therefore will act as a means of containing China's increasing hegemony in that area.
Why is it, Harry, that we don't? I mean, I couldn't name anybody in the Indian administration, and yet normally when a country starts to become really active and so on, you start to hear about the major players. But I couldn't name one. Perhaps you can, because you look at these things through a real telescope. But why is it that they don't have predominant people? Perhaps they do, but why is it that they haven't managed to impinge on? Yeah, I'm not exactly stupid. On my conscience.
Well, Modi has put his hand on a fairly strong hand on governing India. It is a democratic country, and he is elected, but he's consolidated his power base to a degree that, and even his regional power bases. So he's very much the person in control, and I would imagine that he does not tolerate other people, members of his cabinet, for instance, getting into the limelight that would overshadow him. So you don't get like in a soccer team where some of the players are star players and their names become household words. Indian politicians, and in fact, to a degree, let's be frank, apart from one or two people in the United States, a lot of people couldn't mention the cabinet members of those in ministerial positions in the United States.
I know that's true.
Yeah, and even to a degree in Britain. I mean, we get a lot of non-entities have been appointed to so-called key positions, but the average man in the street, I doubt if could name them, many of them.
No, although it was interesting, Yvette Cooper was being interviewed this morning, and there's a politician that's gone back and back and back, a real stayer. Okay, but before we come back to the UK and Europe, let's continue to look at the Far East, because we mentioned last week Australia, and you said it's quietly coming up on the outside rail, but it is coming up. How is it behaving in this rather maelstrom of international politics?
Well, I think it's beginning to exert its presence in a very subtle but effective way. And Australia is going to be a force to be reckoned with. It will never become a major world power. It's not even in the top 10 economically, but it is going to be a force to be reckoned with, and it will be a leader in that region of those who are seeking to resist expanding Chinese hegemony. And so, no, I think Australia is a very interesting country and the Australians themselves are evolving, and they're evolving at a rate that can absorb the different cultures that are helping build it. It's not overwhelmed with immigration. It's still retaining a sense of natural character of culture, and many British people and moving young people who feel their futures are limited in Britain are moving to Australia, and Australia is opening the doors wide to them, and they have lots of opportunities, and they're get better pay, better work conditions than they would in Britain. So I think we'll hear and see more of Australia in the next few years, particularly in the English context.
Is it going to drag New Zealand along with it?
Oh, I think so. And New Zealand is an entity on its own. It's stuck out there in the middle of nowhere, but distances are so small these days with modern transportation systems. So I don't have any worry about the future of New Zealand. It will never become a major power or a major influencer, but I can see Australia starting to flex its muscles a little bit and play a more important role in international affairs.
Right. Okay. Now you mentioned once Japan. Once, like China, you couldn't buy anything that wasn't Japanese. And then it took a dip economically, and as far as influence is concerned. Where does it stand now? Is it on its way back? Is it not? Is it going to hibernate? Or what about Japan?
Well, Asian philosophy generally is a protectionist philosophy, and China particularly, and to a large degree Japan. They're very keen on pushing exports and pushing up industrial productivity, and so they can flog off the excess things they produce at cheap prices to the rest of the world. And they're export or die nations. That's no question about it. I mean, the strength of China is exports, and indeed Japan. Japan is probably one of the most indebted of the Western world's economies. But I think I've mentioned this before. Much of their debt is held by the Japanese themselves, little old ladies' savings accounts and that sort of stuff, instead of being in hock to the major international, monetary sources to investors. So no, it's fairly solid. Apart from its demographic problem, as I say, it's quite possible that in the next 100 years its population will halve. The bigger challenge in the population explosion is certainly going to come from places like Africa, and particularly countries. I mean, I did read figures recently that Tanzania is exploding. I mean, they're probably going to go into about 200 or 300 million people by mid-century. I mean, it's quite amazing.
Yeah. All right. Let's move back then to Europe because we've talked about Marine Le Pen, but Europe is still arguing and discussing how it should stand as far as Russia is concerned. As far as the war is concerned, its expansionist policies, and indeed Putin himself. So, what's the story there?
Well, Europe can't seem to get its act together. I mean, they haven't come to terms with the fact that Ukraine is fighting their war for them and making both the civilian and economic sacrifice necessary to contain Russia, and is doing a very good job of it. And I think Europe in general, apart from the ones that face directly the Russian threat, such as Hungary, Poland, and the Baltic states, they're not pulling their weight. And they're in fact almost as if they don't want Ukraine to win. But there's more. There's every indication that Ukraine can win this war. Russia is in deep trouble. It's a shrinking economy, a shrinking population at that. There's still a military force in technical terms to be reckoned with, obviously, with their huge atomic arsenal. But it's a question of whether they will survive as an economic entity in the long term. And if they prevail against Ukraine, then they'll be emboldened to attack Europe, and that's the threat. And Europe is not rearming as it should do, but it wouldn't need to if it supported Ukraine and had Ukraine, as I said just a few moments ago, doing its job for it. And so their support of Ukraine is a lot of, fancy words, but not the deeds and actions that are necessary to go with it. And Europe is, the European Union is a bit of a joke. I mean, that's a spent force and is proving its and of course is running into rebirth of nationalism in the different countries. And the Schengen Treaty of open borders is doomed to failure. Many of the nations triggered by this recent event in Ceuta in the Morocco, the Spanish enclave and bordering on Morocco. I think Europe is proving itself unable of conducting its own affairs, and the nations, their individual needs, they're looking to take care of themselves more and more. There's an antipathy towards Brussels, which is growing, and certainly in countries like France and to a degree Germany and I won't say Spain, because Spain seems to be a strange going through a strange phase at the moment with Pedro Sanchez and his government. It's very much of a left-wing government, an open door government, and they're triggering demographic upheaval by regularizing, hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants at the same time, and which is, prompting neighboring countries to want to set up their border controls again. So there's a conflict going on in Europe between nationalism and internationalism, if you will.
Before we go back to that, because that's interesting reflection. Do you think that these recent successes by Ukraine of managing to lob a few drones or bombs or whatever, actually quite close to Moscow and quite close to St. Petersburg, is going to have an effect on Putin?
Well, there are two things that are happening there. One is their ability to improvise is forging ahead, and in the modern battlefield is that technology is such that you've got to be one step ahead of the enemy. And as weaponry develops, you've got to find a way of counteracting it, and they're doing that. We and the rest of Europe are preparing to fight the last war, and the new technologies, which have to change almost daily in the modern battlefield, we're neglecting that. Now, on top of that, their strategy, the Ukrainian strategy, is proving very successful. They're aiming at the economic, heart of Russia. They destroying the equivalent of Amazon over there. So the impact upon people's daily lives. They're destroying the infrastructure in the oil industry, which is Russia's main source of wealth. With the result that with a nation that lives off oil, the average Russian has got to queue up for hours just to fill a gas tank in his car, so their tactic, their strategy is very successful, both technically and how they're taking the war to the Russian people. The people are now becoming well aware that they're in line of fire, which they weren't, which will probably push Putin into going for mass mobilization, which will not sit well with the Russian middle class, because so far they haven't seen their sons and daughters go off into get slaughtered in the Donbass. But once the average Russian people see their kids going off to war and not coming back, they'll react against Putin. Putin's got a tough road to hill to climb to get himself out of this one.
All right, let's come back to Trump and Iran.
Mm-hmm. Well, word has it that he's run out of missiles. He can't politically, he can't put boots on the ground, which is the only way of solving the problem definitively or even quickly. So he's trying to fight a long-range war just by aerial bombardment, and he so far has limited himself principally to military targets. And unless he is prepared to bite the bullet and go for civilian infrastructure, bridges, oil refineries, desalination plants, and the rest, he'll lose it. And in fact, the argument is that he has lost the war in Iran. The Iranians, decimated though they may be in terms of their leadership, have grown different heads, and they're more powerful now than they were before the war. And given that they've established control of the Strait of Hormuz, it seems that they're going to come out of it stronger than when they went in, more powerful. They've learned how to play the cards well, and there's only a limited time when the American public will continue to support this adventure.
Now, where does Israel stand in all of this that's going on there?
Well, Israel may eventually be sacrificed by the West, which would be a terrible mistake, because if it just does become an Islamic caliphate from the river to the sea, as the expression goes, then who knows where that will lead the world in the next 50 years. So it's essential for regional balance that Israel survives. But already, there's the denigration of Israel by many of the so-called intellectual Western powers is such there's a lot of anti-Semitism floating around at the moment, and it's focused on the state of Israel.
Is that going to affect it? I mean, in many ways, Israel for many years has withstood this anti-Semitic feeling. I mean, that's never really gone away, Harry, has it?
Well, it never has done, and if America cuts Israel loose, or if the West cuts Israel loose and doesn't have the moral and the philosophical support that it requires to survive in an Arab sea, then it will be curtains for Israel. Now, they're not going to go down without a fight, and they're a very powerful nation. Their military, they punch above their weight militarily, and of course, allegedly, they've got the atomic bomb. So, if push comes to shove, there'd be a huge price to pay. It would lead, in fact, to the destruction of many of the Arab countries, because they're not going to go down without a fight. It's never again philosophy following the disaster of the Holocaust in World War II.
Right, Harry. Well, let's return to Britain and Europe, but let me ask you about a very little country that manages to punch above its weight quite often, and that's the Republic of Ireland.
Oh, I think the island has missed the plot, has lost the plot. They talk about anti-Semitism. It's a hotbed of anti-Semitism. They have managed to play their cards within Europe quite well, keep their taxes low, and to give them unfair advantages, commercial advantages in the European context. But I wouldn't say that Ireland is a well-run country at the moment at all. I love the Irish. I love the country, but their leadership is very doubtful at the moment. I don't. I wouldn't put much hope on the future of Ireland unless it changes its its political philosophy quite dramatically in the next few years.
And what would that mean? A change, total change of administration at the top, a new parliament?
Well, I think it's got to accept reality. It can't. It's benefited through creating tax structures whereby many of the big international outfits, American outfits, um, have established their headquarters in Ireland for tax reasons. So it has been an artificial boost to the Irish economy, but their political philosophy, it's almost a woke approach to politics, and a little bit like the way Cambridge University is run these days. Mhm.
Right. Let's return before we come across the channel to the European theatre, because you referred to this mass immigration from the little Spanish enclave
Mhm.
to the Spanish mainland. Does that send warning shots to the rest of Europe about immigration?
Well, I think it does, and I think all over Europe, mass immigration is changing their cultures to a degree that they're becoming very concerned about it. But there are two ways of looking at the Moroccan invasion, if I want of a better word, of Ceuta. That's because it's a way, I think, of Morocco expressing its displeasure with Spain because of Spain cozying up to Algeria, and at the expense of Morocco. There was disputed land between Morocco and Algeria, and Spain came down on the side of Algeria to the expense of Morocco, and so it's just a way of their means of their expressing their displeasure by allowing or even pushing a large number of potential immigrants to storm the bastion of Ceuta and create this problem. And many of them have been returned to Morocco, of course, but it could happen again. I think it's the Moroccan authorities simply saying to the Spanish, "Don't push us too far, because we have this means of
Getting back at you, yeah.
causing problems for you." Now, that of course is being exploited by the anti-immigration movement in the rest of Europe, and because these people, if they do get into Spain, mainland Spain, they very quickly make their way into, make their way through Spain to France, Italy, anywhere, and so there's, I say, going back to what I mentioned earlier, there's a move towards more national identity border controls, which is happening and the whole philosophy of Europe is based on the Schengen Treaty, that you have open borders. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, what's happening to the Schengen Treaty? Is that in tatters?
Well, it's going to be people re-establishing border controls at an alarming rate, which could signal the end of the Schengen Treaty. But at the same time, in so many words, the leading politicians in Europe are still professing full and complete commitment to it. So it's not about to be abrogated. It's still there, and open borders policy is still part of the European philosophy. But how long it'll last, as I say, under the current climate, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Right, now let us return to our favorite country, the United Kingdom.
Yes.
Andy Burnham, how's he doing?
Well, there's what they've talked about, the Burnham honeymoon, which is rightly so. I think he's quite a charismatic person, and he's got he knows internal politics inside out. He's pretty weak on international affairs, but he's seen as one of us by the people in Britain. And I think he has a good chance of succeeding. He's got some insurmountable problems to overcome, not least economically, and not least his own backbenchers, because unless he reforms the welfare state of Britain, where you've got hundreds of households earning far more on welfare than they ever could by working, and some of the figures are quite dramatic. I think it's 600,000 British families earn twice as much on welfare as the average person working in Britain would earn, and 16,000 of those families are on more than £60,000 a year.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine it? It's just a frightening thing. And if he tries to reform that a little bit, like Starmer did, ever so slightly, his own backbenchers will rise up against him. And of course, I think he's trying to be a good prime minister. He wants to be a good prime minister, and his heart is in the right place, but his mind is. He is still, nonetheless, a staunch socialist. And you've got to understand the big difference between socialism and conservatism. I'm not talking the Conservative Party, I'm talking about conservatism, is that one believes you can spend money, the other one believes you've got to earn it before you can spend it. You've got to create the wealth before you can distribute it. And at the moment, Andy Burnham shows no signs of trying to change the system where he's presiding over a shrinking economy. Every time any of these wealthy, so-called wealthy, I mean, talking £100,000 a year class, leaves Britain, it takes 10 workers to pay the same taxes that they were paying. And I mean, that's hemorrhaging. It's a financial hemorrhage to a degree that, never mind the millionaires or the super rich people, well, they don't give a damn anyway, because they can go wherever they like. They can afford it. But the major people paying taxes, of course, are the middle class and the so-called upper middle class. Well, the upper middle class don't earn more than £100,000 in Britain anymore, because otherwise you'll be paying 8 times as many taxes as the guy earning £25,000. 8 times as much tax, and you can't tax the poor people who haven't got any money. Georges Marchais, the famous communist left-wing firebrand in France, he said you've got to look for the money where it is. You can't tax the poor. You've got to take money away from the people who've got it. And equal distribution of wealth, well, that's a flag waving. It's a banner for socialism, but you can only milk the cow so much before it decides to stop giving milk.
Do you think that this period has quietly given Badenoch a chance to bring the Conservatives back into the debating circle?
I think she is managing to rally the Conservative ideal. The Conservative Party had gone to hell in a handbasket. It had become a bunch of wets. I mean, useless. I mean, their last 14 years in power was a total disaster, and they needed to be chased out of there. And there are still an awful lot of them who don't know quite who they are and still have inherited this woke philosophy. So she's trying to center it on good old conservative values and kick out people who don't want to follow that particular line of thought. Now, whether she's right or wrong is not a question. That's depending on your political viewpoints. But she is trying to rebuild the core, heart, the character, the spirit of the Conservative Party. And I think she's a particularly clever girl. I think she's doing it extremely well. Certainly she performs well in PM question times. She kind of, she used to have old Starmer over a barrel on these occasions. How well she'll do with Andy Burnham, I don't know. I don't know how fast he is on his feet. But we're about to see that. He's got a little bit of charisma. He's got lots of parliamentary experience. But how quick his mind works remains to see when he's facing Kemi Badenoch across the dispatch box.
I think
there's a lot to be there's a lot to be hoped for if she can persevere and continue to rebuild the Conservative Party. I think it will be a long time before it becomes a major contender for power. But if eventually a compromise is made between Reform and the Conservatives, and let's just hope that there's no compromise between Reform and what's the other bunch of nutcases there?
It's also got RE at the beginning.
Refuge or something? No.
Something like that.
This.
Yeah. But they are a bunch of nutcases, yeah.
Yeah, they're extremists, and I hope that Farage doesn't try to get into bed with them. That would be a disaster.
What was your view of Farage for this period? Has it altered? Because you've always been a bit of a Farage supporter, haven't you?
Well, I'm a supporter of his ideas, the guy's a bit of a showman. Individually, I can't quite get a handle on Farage. He's a bit of a fairground showman, very clever, and all the rest of it. But it's ideas that I go for, and he has, to combine two subjects here. He has managed to pull Kemi Badenoch more towards his line of thought, and away from the wet tourism. And so he has been very successful in that sense. And he has a lot of grassroots support. Question remains, is Reform in a position, has it got the depth of skill to actually become a governing body? And that is causing lots of people to hesitate.
Do you think that this Parliament that will reassemble sometime in late September or whatever will start to show various things? I mean, in other words, just how good Burnham is, how strong Badenoch is becoming, what may happen to Reform and Farage. I mean, it may be quite an exciting Parliament.
Yes, we're going to go through an interesting period in politics, certainly when Parliament reconvenes, because at the moment, this hiatus that we're going through is, it's all very well. I mean, Burnham can throw up certain ideas and promises, and there's nobody there to debate them or even to question as to how they'd be funded. But once Parliament resumes, some of the hard questions will need to be asked, and that's when we'll maybe have a better idea on the direction of travel. So that's a bit of much of an unknown quantity. And going back to the question of the quality of his government, his new chancellor is a man of principle, but he doesn't seem to be speaking very loudly about his principles that he caused him to resign when he was Minister of Defence, that to get British defence expenditure up to a proper and productive level. So is he just going to be a tame chancellor? Is that why he got the job? Because number 10 wants to control number 11. We've very often had very powerful people in number 11 and Chancellor of the Exchequer, and not fully controlled by the Prime Minister. And of course, they do have their hands on the purse strings. And so a Prime Minister cannot just overrule a Chancellor just like that. And has to, there was a constant uneasy relationship between Blair and Brown, even in philosophical terms, never mind in practical governmental terms. But maybe number 10, as I say, wants to control number 11, and have they got a tame chancellor? That all depends. But somebody's got to put the foot down and start to stop spending all of this money, and we're just draining away the national wealth, and it's essentially the welfare program, which is growing like topsy, getting to a ridiculous proportion. And unless they're prepared to bite the bullet, I cannot see the UK economy improving.
Right, Harry. Now, you are an internationalist. looking at everything that's been happening in the various countries with certainly understanding, if not rather more analysis than it's used to. What would you say in the next, well, before we meet again this time next week, what's likely to bubble up and keep us fixed to the screens to see what's going to happen?
Well, I think, news comes in waves. Sometimes there are heavy news days, and what would be major news stories are eclipsed by something even bigger happening. It's normally in the summer hiatus. There is as a parliamentary hiatus. That is, the little stories become the bigger headlines. And for instance, the biggest story running in Britain at the moment, from what I can see, is this story about Jason Alday, this oddball professor type who has finally bitten the bullet and resigned and exposed Cambridge to much ridicule in the process. And so the university authorities have got to explain themselves, and academia has got to explain itself in such a way. Now, before I digress on that, that shouldn't be a leading story. It should be a small story at the bottom of page 3. But in fact, it's a headline story. Well, if that's the major news of Britain, it means that there's not a hell of a lot happening.
I mean, quite. The boys this morning, the two Bs, the two barristers, started, of course, to talk about the early release situation. I
Sure.
mean, that's fairly important, but not in the overall scheme of things.
I think exactly that should be a middle issue. It's not a top headline. It's terribly important, and of course, it's vital to the credibility of the police force and support of the police force, and it points out that we've not been building enough prisons. I mean, that's the fault of the Conservatives, and the people who've gone before. But that should be a mid-level story. The Jason Alday thing should be, as I say, bottom of page 3. The other one should be perhaps a minor headline on page 2. But there are no page 1 headlines in British news at the moment. There's nothing dramatic, and yet we're in a crisis-ridden world, which could drag in Britain in a big way at any moment in time.
Do you think that's partly because Burnham is keeping his powder dry? He's enjoying his triumphant return, as it were, waving to the crowds, and doesn't want to stop the waving by getting involved in something controversial like the support of Ukraine or whatever. Or do you think that we are really entering that sort of period?
Well, obviously, while Parliament is on vacation, the public debate is not in the public eye, and so he truly can enjoy an easy access into his new role. This is why there'll be dramatic change in his position, in how he's viewed in Britain come September. So it will change. Then it will get more headline news. And I don't know. His timing has been impeccable. It's all worked out extremely well for him. But once the big waves start to hit the boat, I think it'll start to rock a bit.
Okay, Harry. We've been going for 54 minutes now. We've got 1 or 2 minutes left. Let me ask you two things. One, because of sporting activity, England versus Argentina in rugby and England versus Argentina in football, there is now a sweep of anti-sentiment against Argentinians. And really, I suppose the only thing that Argentina at home is able to bring to bear in world politics is the invasion of the Falklands. Do you think it might actually go and do that to perk itself up?
Well, it's a possibility because Thatcher's no longer there, and we don't have a navy anymore. So it's a propitious time for them to pull that one off, and take the attention of the Argentine people away from their other concerns, not the least of their team having lost or their economy. Well, no, their economy is pulling up, in point of fact. But Argentina is a wonderful country. I've worked there, and the people are lovely, but they're being manipulated, and the trying to pull it back into some sort of economic order and tamp down inflation. There's no denying that another Falklands adventure would be a distraction to the people, and, as I say, compensate for the loss of their soccer team. But it's a difficult question to answer, because if you look at their soccer team, I mean, they're a bunch of dirty players. I mean, it's absolutely scandalous that they, and it isn't necessary, because they produce some extremely good players. They produce very good soccer teams, but the blatant fouling and abuse of the referee and things like this was a scandal into world football. But no, I would say that there's a very good chance that they're rattling the saber. They'll take it out of the scabbard and perhaps but it's a terrible thing. I mean, the Falkland Islands, discovered in 1690, annexed and for Britain, 1820, was it? I mean, settled by the British. How many Falkland Islanders are there? 2,000 or 3,000, I think, altogether. Overwhelmingly an outpost of Britain. It's got nothing to do with Argentina. Didn't even become a country until after that. So, if anything, historically, it should belong to the Viceroyalty of Uruguay. But anyway, that's another story. That's digging too into the history. Yeah. But it becomes a moral, a philosophical question. But that would be absolutely scandalous if the Argentines took over a piece of Britain's sovereign territory.
Well, now, talking about soccer, I mean, FIFA has made the headlines over the last couple of weeks, and actually is a hugely rich organization, isn't it? And very, very powerful. What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, the idea that Infantino had was to get more funds coming in, and hopefully, with that notion, to bribe many of the poorer soccer associations around the world, and African associations and things, by giving them an immediate influx of money. Now, the idea to do that is not bad. The idea of giving up and selling part of the family silverware was very bad, and you don't want to. We've seen how sponsorship of financial sponsorship of rugby has inhibited the growth of rugby, and I think it would have been a very bad move to try to monetize soccer, and very unnecessary move, because FIFA's got quite a healthy bank account. They've got $5 billion in the bank. That's a fair piece of change. That's more than you and I earn in an afternoon.
It is.
And so if they wanted to help...
It takes us 2 days to get to that level.
Indeed. And so if they wanted to help some of the more struggling soccer associations around the world, they've certainly got the means of doing it as it is. So it's a license to print money. So one cannot help but think that Infantino's initiative was more to cozy up to the financial wizards of this world, and maybe line his own pockets a little bit more. But first of all, he's got a pretty good salary and a lifestyle. I don't know. I think he got ahead of himself there, and it would seem that he's almost discredited himself to the extent that he will be booted out. We'll see what happens in the next couple of months, I guess.
Yeah. Harry, a delight as always.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry we delayed a little bit at the start today, and that was mostly because when it comes to the technology, I come like you from the age when we walked into a studio and somebody else had done all the work, and all we did was push a button, and we were on the air, and away we go. Sometimes I have to do some of these things myself, and they leave me completely and utterly bemused. But anyway, we made it in the end, and another excellent program, which we'll replay, say about 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock today. Thank you, and see you next week.
With pleasure, Keith. Okay, bye.
Adios.
Bye for now. Adios. Adios.